family is artists, and so our pursuit is almost constantly in trying to communicate what we believe in, what we're talented in. Because some people like to separate what they're talented from what they believe or what's their true conviction. Um, I think that in itself, there's a problem going on there. You know, like anything that you are good at is something that also has to have good in it, right? So those two things should probably smack together. Um, so growing up, a big family of musicians. I have four siblings. All of them are musicians. My mom's a musician, songwriter. We grew up watching my mom create music very intentionally. Um, and all my siblings followed after her. I'm not musical. I'm the only one that didn't get that gene. I'm also the middle child, so that's a double whammy. So, you know, like forgotten all in all. Just kidding. But like, you know, we would go out to the streets basically, and my mom would busk for money, and she would give us corners to stand at and do our talents at, and put out a tin can, and we would make our money that way. So we grew up busking in a busking family, communicating not only symbolism, but you know, also creating art for a practical reason, practical need. So I've always been attuned to hustling a message, right? Growing up, I would hustle a message just to make ends meet. And that led me down a lot of different paths, not good ones. And to hustle the message means that you can kind of like talk your way through artwork in a way that the customer's always right. You know, and that's not honest to the artwork. That's just honest to somebody's idea of what you're making. And it's disingenuous. So I would do that a lot. Made a lot of money doing that. And then, you know, I had a quite literally come to Jesus moment. And, you know, I realized that there's no good thing that I can do that I can withhold from God. So I just don't do that. So I used to just make commercial art. I don't make commercial art anymore. I make art. I read the scripture in the morning and make art in the afternoon. That's kind of how it works. And then that way I don't have the burden of being a genius. I can just be a good reader, you know? So, yeah, I think that's kind of where faith kind of ended up tying in completely to my work. And now it just feels boring to make anything else. You know, I feel bored when I'm not connecting the dots, when I'm, you know, just making art that looks good. Most of my art looks a little grotesque, a little scary, but that's because truth presents itself that way, especially if you haven't seen it before. So,
And you touched on obviously the spiritual aspect of things. Is there a particular scripture or story from the Bible that kind of encapsulates your artistic vision?
A specific one would be really hard to tie down, but if I had to like go somewhere instinctually, Yaski behind me really kind of embodies that, and that's the story of Joseph. You know, it's like you're this person, this young person with dreams and ambition, but you don't know how to funnel your ambition yet, and so you become a little prideful, and through that you get yourself in trouble. That was me. You know, my whole journey is I have whoever said talk was cheap couldn't talk like me. Basically, growing up, that was my job. I would make art on the street. I would talk to people at the same time, and those two talents would merge into each other and would make me money. That's how it would work. But you know, pride gets you in trouble. I got in trouble, and you know, just like Joseph, he got in trouble. He would tell his brothers his dreams, his visions, and his brothers being jealous and him not being able to read a room got him sold into slavery. Yeah, you know, Yaski might have had a similar story. But he goes from a rags to riches situation. He learns humility through his talents, through the situations that he's in, and then eventually ends up on top. Um, in fact, more blessed than he ever was before. So I expect that at the end of my story, not because I'm particularly good at what I do. I've met so many talented artists, but I know that there's nobody that can express the way that I worship like I do. So there must be a conclusion to this that has glory in it somewhere. So I think Joseph's story is kind of like how I would embody who I am right now. I think I'm Joseph in prison at the moment. It's kind of I think that's where I'm at in the story. You know, and I'm having a lot of dreams, a lot of visions. We just talked about one of those visions that I have, like that there's an outpouring of visions that need to be interpreted, and I'm waiting for somebody to say, I have something that I need you to visually interpret for me. And my answer will be for them, I don't have the answer, but God does. And I'm going to be a tool for that. So I'm kind of waiting for that moment. It's like an aha moment. Maybe they'll find me. Who knows? Who knows?
And again, to lean on faith,
Yeah.
is there a parallel between finding yourself spiritually and finding yourself as an artist? Like, where does that marriage kind of lie?
Oh, absolutely. One thing I always like to say is that we like to see our talents and we like to see truth as two separate things, and that's a mistake. Um, I think that when you have a good thing and when you have truth, they have to find a nexus point. Otherwise, one can't be good and one can't be two of these two good things have to go together, right? Because they're both good. So where do they cross? I have found that they cross in the tithe. And so it's a complicated concept, but when we think back and when you give something back to God, there is what Numbers would say, the floodgates of heaven open up. The Lord says, test me in this one thing. Tithe to me, give me 10% of what you're doing, and just watch what I do with it. Watch how I multiply you. For artists, for people who are talented in anything, we consider our money to be the only way to do that. I disagree. I think that there is no good thing that you can withhold from God. If that's true, then take your talents and use them. So now I have never wanted to work for a church in my life. Never want to do that. It's never been a desire of mine. I have disdained that calling. It's what I do now. So God's obviously taught me something like that. And now my work is tithed back to the Lord in 10%. And now I give 50. Now I give 75. Now I give 90% of my artwork. 10% are clientele. 90% is me just expressing the gospel story for the sake of mission. Never thought I'd be a person doing that. I was a commercial artist my whole life. That is to say, the nexus is saying that I must tithe what is good back to God in some way. I can't just be a comic book artist that doesn't know how to tithe my artwork back to the Lord somehow. Good things have to be given back to God. There's no good thing that you can withhold. So figure it out. Whether it's like I gotta take 10 minutes to do something, 10% of my time to do a little caricature expression. You gotta figure it out. But once you start doing that, I think it opens up a gateway where you're no longer satisfied with commercial work. It just stops happening. You're like I'm praise the Lord for provision, but I need to do something a little greater than that. And hopefully that's what the floodgate of heaven represents. Doing something a little bit greater each time.
And what would you say is that aha moment that took you from commercial art to something more substantive?
Yeah, I think I worked a lot with chalk, Crayola chalk, basically. I would replicate pieces of artwork on the sidewalk, mostly artwork from the Renaissance. So usually it was Venetian or Italian. Sometimes I would do Germanic Renaissance artists, and I would replicate works on the ground using a humble medium, and then I would communicate artistic motifs to people who wouldn't naturally get the opportunity to interact with high art, whatever that means. So, like my work was all about communicating someone else's message, if that makes sense. It was all about communicating. Obviously, it was a humble work. I want people who are homeless, people who don't have a lot of money, to be able to interact with work that they would never get to interact with because of how you have to present yourself. And that was a good part of the work. But I think at some point, as I was doing commission work, which I think every commission artist has gone through this feeling before, you start to stop wanting to communicate somebody else's idea, or at the very least, you realize that as the creator, you also are profound in that you can make profound things that people want. I think going through so much commercial art, going through so much street performance, hustling the message, uh, there was a breaking point. I'm sure it was in my early 20s. I was I am not moved by my work, and that's a big problem. It's like if I'm not moved by my work, then I'm not passionate. If I'm not passionate, then I'm out of fuel. If I'm not fuel, I should no longer be an artist. It's like a car with no engine. So I think that was my early 20s that started happening for me. But it was through an overwhelming amount of public work that I started feeling like I need to make something that means something to me too. Um, it's really easy to do if you have Devo time. It's, for me it is.
And when it comes to more faith-based work, have you found any resistance in, because obviously the commercial world wants what the commercial world wants. Have you found any conflict within yourself trying to balance out, what are other people want versus what means something to you?
Yes, but not in the way that I think not in the way that you'd imagine it though. Like I think that I was the biggest barrier in regards to making art that was truthful, um, God wise. And being so I was so much in that other world that creating any art with symbolism or imagery or meaning that led back to faith was um, really abrasive for me. I was like, when somebody asked me what things meant, I would like really think about whether I'm going to tell the truth or not. This is crazy. Imagine like you work hard on something and like somebody asks you what it means. You made this, and you're thinking whether you should lie or not.
Like
Like
sales mode.
you're in sales, right? You're in sales mode, precisely. You're in sales mode. You're like, all right, I'm either about to hustle this message, like, or I'm gonna tell people what I intended. Like that's crazy. And so the resistance was mostly in my own heart, because I would do like I said, I do a lot of my artwork live, and I would go to the people to do my artwork. So I do my gospel based artwork in bars, speakeasies, out front of anywhere, in the streets. That's where I do my work. And so the people I interact with are not necessarily prepped and ready for the message. So I was almost like the antithesis to a church artist. I was like a street preacher, but not annoying, if that makes sense. Like you get what I mean. Um, and so every single person that comes up, you really like canvas the person as a salesman. You canvas that person. You're like, what is most likely the message they want to hear today is what goes through my mind, at least constantly. And then I have to make a conscious effort to say what I intended, which was a big growth point for me. Like I think I've become an artist through that process more than I became an artist through my training, which I have never gone to art school. I don't have that kind of training. My training's through books and other stuff that I just pick up, and a gift. But like learning to speak with intention was the art form that I was missing my whole life, right? And once I unlocked that, I became better at art, and I also became more truthful with what I made. So I just think, I mean, that was the world is less of a pusher, than you are, as somebody who, if you come from a commercial art standpoint, if your goal is the bottom line, it's really hard to disincorporate yourself. Like you're not just the bottom line. You are an artist who makes things that are meaningful that you believe. You don't spout lies with your work, and you communicate them honestly when somebody asks you to. Um, so people do push back. Some people are like, people try to convince me that I am a genius or I'm a god, or like they'll try to say crazy. It's crazy what people, but it's my fault. I'm at bars. I like they're drunk, so I don't know what. Like they're just saying stuff. Like no judge. I'm just like they try to convince you. They're like, if I one time, multiple times, I'll tell people the meaning of artwork, and I'll be like, it's gospel centric, it's God centric. Here's what I'm portraying um, in the piece of art, and that person like they'll get up in your face and they'll be like, you are the God, you are, and you have, it's really hard to not receive that. You're like, okay, like I'm not a god. I'm not a god. Like you're like I'm not a genius either, and I'm not a genius because I don't want that burden on me. Like the burden to be a genius is ridiculous, and is why artists don't like communicating their work, because they feel like if they have to communicate their work, they weren't a genius in what they made. But that's one, unrealistic, because everybody sees artwork and they don't know exactly what it means, and it means something different to everybody. And two, it's quite the weight on your shoulders to try to prove to everyone that you're a genius all the time. You don't want that weight. People think they want that. They don't want it. I'm not a genius. I'm not a god. Just in case anybody got confused, like it's just crazy. So that's the kind of push that I feel like. It's from you. It's sometimes from the world, but it's really yourself.
And you'll wind up with like Kanye thinking you're a genius and a god.
Yes, great example. Wow. Yes, what happens when those two things really reach maximum potential? It's disaster. It's like, yeah. I feel like I won't go on a tangent, but I feel like that mind, which is talented, creatively gifted, and perception of yourself, when they make contact with each other and they're reinforcing the idea that you are a god or you are a genius, there's this expectation that you must be something profound every second. And in order to be profound every second, you have to be pretty ridiculous. Like, you have to be more ridiculous than you could ever imagine, right? Like, you have to say things that are ridiculous. You have to be the cutting edge of tomorrow all the time. And the cutting edge of tomorrow isn't always good. Sometimes it's disastrous. Sometimes it's really racist. And that's Kanye. Like, sometimes, it's not always good. So that's a great example of the burden of genius, the burden of being God coming together to create a disaster. I don't want to be that. I'm okay.
And correct me if I picked this up on. You said you had no formal training at
No,
all?
I have no formal training. I graduated human resources and business administration, and I did that even before I did that knowing I wanted to be an artist. And once again, I'm in sales mode right now, right? In sales mode, I was like, my clients are in business school. Why would I go to art school? It's like, and my clients don't know what good art is because they haven't trained in art. So I'm going over there. So I, studied with business owners, and that's where a lot of my clientele comes from. A lot of people that I just ended up studying with, teachers, assistants, all on that side. And I chose that route knowing that, like, my clientele is not going to be artists next to me. That's my competition. And, once you realize that art is subjective, you're just like, you're like, if we're doing competitive art, I'm going to lose every single time. But if we're doing sales, I'm going to win. So, I don't know. I chose, that was my way of thinking back then. Now I just don't really care. Like, I have the muse. I use it. I create art. It's not better than anybody else's art. But I know that I can explain it, and I know that I can exhort about it and inspire through it. And so that's my mission. I'm not a competitive artist. I have a lot of artist friends who are so much better than me. Buy their stuff. If you want good art, buy them. If you want art that means a lot, buy them. Still, still buy them. If you like my art, you can buy it. But, no formal training. I read a lot of books.
So, I mean, that's interesting because it sounds like you came into the art world with a business sense.
Yes, definitely.
Which a lot of artists lack. The business side, even logistical side, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, logistics.
So, what put your mind there? That I gotta know this business aspect of it, but also hold my creative as well.
Yeah, I would say it was a mixture of my mom and dad put together. My dad was like an insurance salesman, for the most part. That's how I knew him growing up. And my mom, a musician, and not the kind of musician that she's not like how do I explain it? My mom was a musician who played music to take care of us, to make money. And not make money in like the shiesty sense. It's make money with I have this talent, I should use it. So she wrote songs. She went to the studio, recorded albums. Then she would go out in the street and promote that album by playing it on the street. And people would give her tips. And that's what I saw growing up. So creativity always used in a practical sense. For me, art is not meditative. It is not relaxing. It's not a kumbaya thing. It's not my therapy. When I do it, I'm sweating. I am nervous. I am. There's a pit here I've learned to interpret as the engine to my work. So my art is not self-serving in any way, if that makes sense. It's not something I do to calm myself down and hold to myself. It's something that I know will be shown to others. And so when I create with responsibility in the same way that my mom would. My dad, being a salesman, a very practical person, he was always on the financial side of our work. And he was honestly the one that always yeah, sure, you can go get a degree in business. Don't let art leave your life. Like, you're an artist. So, which is kind of like strange to have your dad say all the time. It's like, he worked super hard, long hours, and I watched that growing up. And it was grueling hours that he worked. And he'd always come back and be like, you're an artist. You need to make art. And like, I know it doesn't look practical right now, but this will come to fruition. Be an artist. No, don't get a job yet. He'd be like, don't get a job. Be an artist. And so Dad would tell me that, right? Coming from his background, he grew up inner city DC, made it out of DC through military, and then came to Ohio, right? Met my mom, all that stuff. And so he comes from this extremely practical background. And then my mom makes art with a practical intention. And then with my dad being like, go make art, encouraging all his kids to make art. You're a musician, go do music. Don't get a job yet, not yet. Like, I'd be like, Dad, I got a couple of job offers, because I don't know if it's gonna work out. Dad would be like, make them convince you. If you want a job, make them convince you, but don't fold. Like, just keep making. So I think that those, my two figures, mom and dad, kind of conjoining, gave me this precedent where like art was always a practical thing to do. It wasn't like this wishy-washy thing. It was like either you're doing missional art with pure truth behind you, and you have to do it because you're talented in it. And I don't mean have to in like an authoritative sense. I mean have to in that like there's, my worst piece of, I've seen my worst piece of art change somebody's life. I've seen it. If my worst art can change someone's life, I have a responsibility not only to make bad art, but to make good art. So I don't have a lot of time, right? Like I gotta be making bad art, I gotta be making good art. Because the bad art just changed somebody's life. And I didn't like it, but they liked it. And the art that I'm super passionate about, that I consider to be good art or some of my best works, they do something similar on a larger scale. It's like, there's a lot of responsibility to get to. I need to start doing hours like my dad growing up. So I think that's the merging of those two worlds, and that's how I have always seen art. So that's how I operate now. The difference is I just operate it through faith instead of through business.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Because a lot of artists I talk to have, I don't want to say no clue because that sounds a little harsh, but the artist brain and the practical business brain don't typically coexist.
Yeah, they're like opposite.
Yeah, so to hear you say that's a little refreshing that you came into this knowing that, hey, this is business. I have to be practical, but I still have to keep my inner artist child, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that it's easier to understand that principle when you approach art with humility, and that's why when you unburden yourself from being a god or a genius, when you throw that off, you're left with a humility that forces you to explain the things that you make and be intentional. So say I made a perfect piece of art, in my opinion, and I put the art up on a wall, and I expect everyone to know what I meant when I created that art. If they were to do that, then that would prove to me that I'm a genius. What happens is that art typically does not do that. It does it for, some people, but not everybody. And so if you approach it from humility, that is to say, when I create something, I know not everybody's going to get it, but I created this with an intention. You are forced to go out there and make sure people get what you meant when you created. And that's putting artist above artwork, which is a strange way to approach art. Most people will create art and then kind of leave themselves out of it. Sometimes people like to say, that art spoke to me, right? You hang up art on a wall and somebody comes in like, that art really spoke to me. But that was a two-way conversation and it left you out of it. Like the art lives for itself the moment it hits the wall and you leave. I'm devoted to the idea that I'm more important than anything I could ever make, which means I want people to understand and know me before they even know the artwork. In order to do that, I need to be present with people and present with the artwork too. That's a very scary approach for people because we equivocate ourselves to the things that we create. That is to say, if somebody calls my art bad, they're calling me bad. But that's a false equivalence. If somebody doesn't understand the art, they don't understand me. Also a false equivalence, right? So if you are present with the work to explain your intention, not only will people find their own interpretation of the artwork, but they'll be able to do it from a foundation that is true. And the true foundation is whatever you intended for that piece. So I like to be with my artwork. I like to talk about my artwork. Some people say, oh, it's because you're a bad artist. You can't communicate things clearly through art. Bet. Probably not. But nobody can perfectly, right? And so bringing it right back to that faith level, God is an artist and he creates things. And then we experience the things. But he created stuff and he didn't just leave his word out of it. He spoke into his artwork. So I believe that I have a responsibility to do something very similar. Create and then speak into creation so that people have a foundation under which they can understand what my mind just did. Why is it genius? Why is order genius? That's what my art is seeking to provide. Why is order genius? Someone's got to talk about it. Somebody's got to say something. If God had to speak over his artwork, then I'm sure I do. He made something, he's like, I'm going to have to add some clarification to this because it's awesome. But, they're not going to get it, I think, that sums it up. I think so.
So what is your overarching message with your art? What is if your art was a movie, what would be the ultimate plot of what you're trying to do with your art?
I think that my work, I use a lot of Black Indie ink. It's a very dark medium. My goal is to be a shadow of something great, constantly, scripturally. There are things in the world that represent a shadow of what is truly good. And what we can be, I think the highest thing that I can be as an artist is to be a shadow of what God intended in the earth. So I create artwork that hopefully casts a shadow that makes people turn around, And so they'll see some of my pieces and they're like, something is religious about this. Even though it doesn't look like it, it's not presented, in an obvious way. But there's something behind this piece that isn't just about the message, it's about who made the message too. And so the moment that they feel that, yes, they're making a parallel between me being the creator and the artwork, being what I have created. But I also want them to draw that larger parallel, that when I look at the roses or when I look at the tree casts a shadow of something that's greater. And you have to wonder who the artist is. So I think all my artwork is supposed to make people ask, who's the artist? And whether they're talking about me or they're talking about God, who is the artist? And I think that's the greatest thing any artist can hope to achieve. I think the world confuses people and they don't want the artist to be a part of the message at all. I think that's a shame. I think it's a shame. I'm more important than anything that I've ever made. And I think God's more important than anything that he's ever made too. So we're kind of we're pretty similar in that way. So I hope people see that in my artwork when they go through it. And I know all my artwork looks very different. I think that's because I feel very different very often. I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to recognize my work and be like, oh, that's a Blue or that's a Benjamin or whatever you say. But hopefully they'll be able to say, man, whatever, the creator definitely had an intention. Hopefully they're able to say that. So I think that's how I summarize my work.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that when you were showing everything in your studio space, I would call it. You don't seem to have a definitive style. Mm-hmm. It seems like you like to play with a lot of different styles, different techniques. So what would you say is, as an artist, what is your home as a creator? Where do you find solace in just a medium or technique? Do you have that? Do you stay away from having that? Where are you with that?
I'll say what I tell students that I teach art, because most of them have the same question. How do I find my style, right? My answer to that is that nobody can mess up the way that you mess up. That's everybody can make stuff. And if I were to draw a tree and draw it perfectly, I don't think I could, but if I did do that, and if you did it as well, they would look the same. which means we both perfectly executed an image of the tree. But what happens in art is as I am attempting to replicate what I am looking at, my body gets in the way of me doing that in a way that cannot be replicated. So I make mistakes. My line is too exaggerated. Perhaps my shading is too dark. Maybe the way that I created the figure of the tree, the branches are too long. Whatever it was, I created a variable that cannot be replicated by anybody else because it was not intentional. So I tell people, and I do this for myself, identify those places, in the pursuit of perfection, identify those places that you see yourself making mistakes in, always, and then blow it up, make it bigger, show it more. You'll see, I make my hand's very unsteady, so I make a lot of drips on my paintings. They just fall everywhere. You can kind of see one falling down here. You know, like my paintings are littered with mistakes that only I can make. For example, like there's like some lines that like I definitely ran my hand across because like I wasn't paying attention. And like those aren't intentional things, but in the pursuit of trying to limit that mistake, I definitely find a certain type of precision that only I can make when I mess up. So I obviously become a better artist, become a better craftsman, learn more things, be better at the craft. Eventually you'll start to see where you vary from somebody else, from everybody. And I guarantee you, it's not in how well you do something. Because somebody's better than you somewhere, all the time. But nobody can up the way that you do, right? Nobody. So I focus on that. Like, where are my mistakes? Where do I mess up often? Okay, exaggerate that. Now you're being intentional with your shortcomings. And I think there's something really profound about that. Being intentional with shortcomings. Be intentional with, it's like saying instead of looking at something as a disability, looking at as the thing that makes you unique instead. So I think I hone in on that. I think all my artwork does look different, but if you really go into it, you will find similarities in every single piece, whether it's abstract or figurative pieces that reference back to me. You say like, oh, that's how blue makes mistakes. I know that that's a blue. That's the only way I think people will be able to recognize me as an artist historically. They'll be like, nobody messes up the nose like that. I know who does that. Like except one person, you know. So yeah, I think that's what I hang on when I'm creating artwork. And it also lets me like relax a little bit, you know, because like I said, I sweat a lot when I work. I'm very nervous when I work. So I think I focus my adrenaline there.
And what would be your biggest piece of business advice to artists? Visual artists?
Be willing and ready to talk about your work. And there will be pushback on that statement for sure. But if we're talking business, imagine a product that we don't advertise. Imagine a product that we don't put out there anywhere. In fact, imagine a product we don't explain. We just place it somewhere and we just hope that it becomes a supply chain and everyone buys it. That's stupid. So if it's stupid to do that in regards to a product, it's stupid to think that will happen with your artwork. We think that it's good enough to be good at the craft. It's not good enough. Yeah, because if you have something to say, if I whisper it, nobody's going to hear it. So I have to amplify my voice so that more people are exposed to what I seem to be true, what I think is true, right? So as business advice, I think the most practical thing you do is get your artwork out there and be next to it, which is why I like galleries. I like galleries, but the gallery accentuates the artwork and doesn't include the artist, the thing that makes it profound, right? So, and I think it'll blow up. Your artwork will blow up that way. I used to do something called coffee hopping, and I would basically make artwork in a public space, in 3 public spaces per day. I would choose one space, do it in a coffee shop, then I hop to a different coffee shop, do it in public. And I teach students this. It's really easy as an artist growing up, and you're like, I want to be an artist, but I'm too scared to show my work because if people insult my work, they're insulting me, and it makes me a terrible person. You know, all that, the whole thing. But they like to draw like this. Everyone draws like this. My advice, straighten out your shoulders, put the work before you, straight arm, and draw like this. It invites people to ask, what are you making? What are you doing? Do you do this full time? Keep your business card on you. The moment they ask, you just slip it over. They will contact you. They're not going to choose the best artist. They're going to choose the artist they know. That's just like, you're not going to choose the best product. You're going to choose the product you saw on TV. So consider, I mean, like, it's so silly that people don't know that. And it's just the culture of visual fine art to not want to advertise, to not want to be present with your work, to think that your artwork is good enough to stand by itself. And I bet you it will, but it'll stand without you. Like, yeah, it'll stand, you're not going to be included. So, include yourself. That's what I'd say. Include yourself in the work.
And I read conflicting things about the gallery world.
Mm-hmm.
Some artists love it, some artists hate it, some feel it's usatory,
Yeah.
feel it's art dealers are basically like pimps.
Yeah, right. Like, I'll take 80%. You can like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
what
true.
What is your take on the gallery system as it is, and what has been your experience in the whole gallery world?
So galleries are not bad inherently. They are businesses, just like if you consider yourself a business, they're businesses just like you. Which means that they have a bottom line and an agenda, right? And they are pushing that agenda. I think a mistake that we see is like galleries are, we see them as servants when they're not servants of the art world. They're not here to serve you. They're not here to help you. And like, yes, they might have a good mission statement. They also have rent. You know what I mean? Like, so, fallacy number one, you put galleries on this pedestal where you're like, they're here to serve artists and make sure that we get out there. That's not what they're there for. They're a business run by a passionate person, love them to death. They still have rent to pay, right? And then we go down to a different pedestal. It's like, you have art that you want to show, but the place that you are showing it has a culture that it defines how you interact with your artwork, right? And when I go to galleries, I definitely stand out, not because my art is better, and it actually usually isn't. It's because I'm there talking. And it's like, because I can't help myself. And so, for me, I find galleries to be a little abrasive because I disrupt the space a little bit. I'm not loud. I'm just talking. Like, I like to be by my artwork. I like the other art. I'm not here to enjoy it though. Like, I'm not gonna walk around like I'm another consumer. I don't consume. I am here to output. And that's why I'm here to hand out cards. Like, so if we're talking like an actual business, artists like to pretend like they're businesses and then like keep their product a secret. And that you can't do that. That's not business. That's a cult that you're trying to get people into. Like, you can have some of my artwork. I choose you. No. You're trying to get chosen, right? So, and then galleries take a lot of your money. They just do. Like, the last one I was in, like, I won't name drop, but it was like 70%, and I was like, 70? And so, I was definitely selling under the table for sure. Like that's why I'm talking. So like, if someone's like, I really want to buy this, I'm like, wait a week. Don't buy it yet. Be the same price because I'm doing my own business. So galleries are fine. Galleries are a good way to get exposed to other artists, to network. It's a networking opportunity. That's how you should see it though. It's not a business for you. It's a business for them. And they are like pimps sometimes, like especially in a bad gallery, which there's a lot of bad galleries, 70% is crazy, like I think 30% is crazy, but I understand that they have rent. So, there's nothing wrong with the gallery. There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to be a business person too. Don't let the gallery be your business. I don't think so. But hey, I've never been trained in art, so don't take any of my advice. I've never been trained.
All right, so my thing with galleries is that, one, usatory, yes, the fees are ridiculous. Like,
Like, what?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it feels like they tried to, and it may not be intentional. Like you said, they're a business. They almost try to overcompensate on artists that do sell versus what they bring in that don't sell,
Mm,
which is unfair to the artists.
yeah.
So why do I have to make up for the other acquisitions or the other relationships that
Right.
are profitable? So
Plus the entry fee. Oh, we're not even counting that.
well,
Like,
I mean, the whole
we're not-
was like crazy when I learned about it. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around like, and I'm a music person, so I'm like,
Mm,
at some point, hip hop artists learned, you know what, independence is the way to go.
yeah.
So I'm wondering if artists will
need that.
eventually pick up that lifeline that,
I'm like,
maybe I can use a gallery as a business card essentially.
yeah,
But
big
then
business
become
card.
my own corporation, so to speak.
Musicians are so smart, and I'm very lucky. I think that I grew up with a bunch of musicians. Like that was like watching them go out in the street and play music to people. They made their own stage and then they spoke their artwork into existence. And then they didn't whisper their songs, they sung it so that others could hear it, right? So I watched that as a precedent for how I create artwork. Because I was, I was this. I'm like, hopefully someone will buy my work someday. I'm not showing anybody. And then I was like, well, I need to pick up a musician's playbook. And for me, that was like, I need a way to make a loud piece of artwork where I'm included in the creation process. Because the reason why you can't dissociate a musician from its artwork is because the musician plays or sings it, and therefore they're never separable. Whereas visual artists, we make something, it's like raising a child and then putting them out into the world to fend for themselves. And so the medium is fundamentally different if you're not approaching it like a business person. Musicians, when they sing their songs to others with a tip jar in front of them, they are adopting a business position, right? Whereas you could sit here at home, play music for yourself, and then just hope someone hears your song out the window. That would be a self-consuming way of advertising your art. It's just about you, right? And so artists, because, and maybe it's a little bit because of galleries, it's a lot of factors. We believe that we can create something, not speak about it or advertise it, and it will go big. And so we need to adopt the musician mindset. You make yourself inseparable from the work. The lyrics coming out of your mouth. You are creating the artwork in front of people actively. And basically what happens is someone says, how can I make you do it again? Instead of saying like, I want the work without you, they say, how can I make you do this over and over again? And which is why musicians are so profitable and artists are called starving artists, right? It's like Travis Scott is on stage with millions of people shouting his name because he's inseparable from his work. Half of us know who Van Gogh is, so it's like, they're separate. They're completely separate. And the one thing that does make us super famous is when we die. That's when we're killed, bam, like our sales skyrocket and someone gains off of that. That's like, because all of a sudden, you are inseparable from the work because you no longer exist either. So it's like the only way to get you is to look at your paintings now because you're gone. And so scarcity has created value. Musicians do that all the time when they do live performances. The scarcity gives it value. So I'm hoping that pendulum swings and you start to see more live painters. Like, so it's like, I just can't work with the stress under it. That's not true. You can work with the stress under it. You just believe you can't make the best possible work in front of someone else. But if your goal is to make the best possible work instead of communicating a message, then you're gonna have a business conflict, So that's why when I said, like, hey, like I'm never, it's not a meditative process for me. It's not relaxing to create art. If my goal was to relax, I would do it with no intention of showing anybody else, but I do have intention of showing someone else. And if that's true, then I'm an ad agency. I'm advertising. I need to go out there and advertise, right? So I hope artists take that approach. You see more artists out there, more on the streets doing stuff. Like either you're gonna get paid with exposure by a company or you're gonna go, do your own exposure. It's insulting to get paid with exposure. If you don't want to get insulted, go out there and do your own exposure. You know, set up a canvas on the street. No one will stop you. Start painting. They'll ask for your card. And also, people aren't good at art. So even if the art doesn't look good, people will still find it impressive. Like, I think that's one thing we forget. Like, nobody knows how to make art. So when, like, the first thing I'd ever made on the street was so horrible, and I remember it vividly. I remember I was like, it's so bad. It's so bad. But people loved it. They loved it. They loved the work. They gobbled it up. They tipped. They asked for commissions. It was not good work. And I don't mean humbly like, oh, it wasn't good. I mean like it was bad. like if I wouldn't show people it if I had known I was going to make it like that. But it was still effective because I was present with my artwork the same way a musician is present with every mistake they make on stage. You know, bad key, you're still there, and the show must go on, right? So, yeah, playbook for musicians, a good place to start, I think.
So, anything else you want to speak on before we wrap up? Any other parting thoughts? Anything?
I mean, yeah, as I've said, I make artwork for people very specifically, and I like to be available with my artwork, so I do a lot of events. If people want art at events, I love doing that. Mostly nonprofits and stuff like that. That's really fun for me. But you know, artists should get their work out there. I just feel like we really gotta get our work out there, and it takes more than just galleries. It takes more than just, you know, creating something and hoping people see it. It really takes advocating for yourself beyond your work. You know, like advocate for yourself as a person. And I feel like that's the way through. I feel like that's my ticket out of the Joseph prison cell, is advocating for myself, you know? And I think that it'll happen. So I'm looking for my pharaoh with a dream. So if anybody's out there, they need an interpretation of something, I can't do it, but I know somebody who can, so let me know.
Have you done a solo show yet?
My first ever solo show was done here in Baltimore. I moved here 1.5 years ago. And until then, like I said, I'm always public artwork everywhere but a gallery, basically. And I did it at a place called Clipper City Barbershop at Fells Point, right across from the Sagamore Pendry. And I don't know if you've ever been there before. It's like a little green building.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Right next to it's nearby the point, and you know, in between the Fells Ice Cream Point, right across from Sagamore. And they closed down the shop, and we turned the whole place into like my gallery. And that was like a month after getting here, because I was doing street art. I had no connections here in Baltimore at all. But I went out, I brought my artwork, and I started painting in the streets. A barber found me and was like, this place right behind you, we'll host your show. And I did it. Testimony to exposure. That was the first gallery show that I had done here with no connections whatsoever besides them. And it was great. It was awesome. We sold work, you know, like I handed out a bunch of cards, and I got to work with cool brands, Nike, New Balance, and Uncle Nearest Whiskey. That was fun. And Angel's Envy Whiskey. So that was just by being out in the street. Testimony to the streets. That's the only private show. That's the only like solo show I've done. But I'm almost ready to do another one, because I'm now realizing that if I do a solo show, I can talk as much as I want. I'm now realizing, like, wait, I can go one by one through pieces. I can tour people through the whole thing. I can just talk and talk and talk. And like, I can answer questions. I can open spaces for people to enter in and give their own interpretations about art. Yeah, it'd be a concert. Yeah, it'd be a concert. You'd be like in the same way that somebody sings along with the artist when they play a song, but they're not in key. They're just singing along with them. I can let people interpret artwork and be like, what did you think about this artwork the first time you saw it? Like, oh, I thought it was a pig. Like, they would like say some crazy stuff. But like, that's just them singing off key for a little bit. And that's fine. I find 100, almost like 80% of the time, I'll create something, and this is the reason why I do it in public, that somebody will come up and interpret the artwork before I've even thought of what I exactly want it to be. That is to say, even people who are not artistic with their hands are artistic up here, right? So in the same way, like sometimes you might be in church and somebody will speak in tongues, but the person who speaks in tongues doesn't interpret the tongues. Somebody else comes up and interprets so that edification can happen. I think in the same way, sometimes I create stuff, and if I'm in front of an audience trying to edify them, I can trust that somebody in the audience will come up and be like, this reminds me of this. And I'll be like, bam, I'm writing that down. That's the meaning of this piece of artwork. And now we're doing corporate artwork. We're doing corporate worship or corporate prayer, whatever you want to put it into, whatever box you want to place it into. That's a concert. Like you said, that's a concert. Like it's no longer just about me, even though it's my artwork. But the interpretation, like I've said multiple times, doesn't belong to me. I don't always have it. So I think I will do a solo show. I don't know how I'll do it, but I would love to do a solo show. And I'm definitely it would be so cool. People would have no idea. Like, I wouldn't just be like floating around, where's the artist? He's right there. I mean, wearing a hat. Like it says artist, like, so you can ask questions, that's I'm glad you brought that up. Because now I can start planning that.